Good morning. Welcome. Glad you're here. Glad that you have taken this time this week to spend this time together with family, friends, watch group, whatever it is. My name is Melissa Jonas, and I'm grateful to be doing our call to worship this morning. As we prepare our hearts and minds, I'd really like us to take our eyes and focus them on the fact that God is faithful. I'll be right back with our call to worship after announcements.
Got just a few announcements for you this morning, and the first one is we are hosting a fireside chat following this series at the training center. If you're processing your own questions of faith, or you find yourself in a supporting role with somebody asking big questions of faith, we want to be and we want to create a safe landing space for you to process those things. If you are a parent at the Gathering Network and you have kids age 9 and up, you've maybe wondered what the next steps will be for that age group in our church context. We know that question is being asked and has been asked, and we want to engage with you on that question. So we want you to mark your calendars for Wednesday evening, November 2nd at the training center, and we're inviting you to come and to be with us as we start to think about the future of the youth at the Gathering Network. There will be more information and more reminders to come, but go ahead and mark your calendars now for that Wednesday night, November 2nd at the training center. Sunday, November 7th is our next all together. We are moving indoors for the winter, and we will be at the Vox Theater at 10 a.m. that Sunday. Keep in mind that it is daylight savings time that day. We will be rolling our clocks back an hour on Saturday night, but we will be together that Sunday morning, November 7th at the Vox Theater off of I-35 and Southwest Boulevard. We will have a family style service incorporating people of all ages, from the youngest among us to the oldest, and we will work on building our joy together as a church body as we come together for the winter. And you can find all that you need to know about that move indoors at gatheringnetwork.org. Keep in mind, we will continue to follow whatever CDC guidelines are in place at that time, and so you can expect that as we get together that Sunday. And we hope to see each and every one of you there.
I'd like us to read our scripture for the morning. 1 Peter 4:19. Therefore, those also who suffer according to the will of God shall entrust their souls to a faithful Creator in doing what is right. I want to skip a little bit ahead and read one more verse, because that verse doesn't sound super encouraging. I want to skip to verse 6 of chapter 5. So 5, 6, and 7. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you at the proper time, casting all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. As we are working in our minds and in our spirits and our hearts in the challenges that have gone on in the last couple of years, it could be hard to say, where is this faithful God that you're speaking of? Who is this faithful God that you're speaking of? As we work through things like deconstruction, as you work through, where is your faith? You could say, I don't know this faithful God. He's not been faithful to me. We could argue all day. Is it the will of God that we suffer? Why is there suffering? Those points have been argued for hundreds of years. What I want to focus on is the fact that says, entrust your soul to a faithful Creator. He is faithful. Cast your anxiety on Him. He cares. I read words that really spoke to my heart. I'd like to share them. Suffering is not an embarrassment to the Christian faith. It is the thread with which Christ's name is stitched in our lives. Rebecca McLaughlin wrote that. I want to challenge and encourage you. Where's the stitching? In these times of suffering and hardship, as I'm sure many have faced, are you turning to Christ and allowing Him to be stitched into our lives, showing His faithfulness? Can we pray? Lord, we come before you knowing that you are a faithful Creator. We surrender our hearts and our minds and our spirits to you. We surrender our ideas and our plans. Lord, we cast our fears and our anxieties and our concerns on you, not knowing the outcome, not knowing the future. But we do know that you care, that your faithfulness is true. Encourage us, Lord, in that. Lift our spirits, lift our hearts. Thank you. Amen.
Lord, I come, I confess, bowing here, I find my rest. Without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense and my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. The sin runs deep, your grace is more, but grace is found this where you are, and where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Yeah, Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. So teach my song to rise to you when temptation comes my way. When I cannot stand, I fall on you. Oh Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every
You guys, good morning, and thanks for joining us again for the third installment, the final installment of this series on deconstruction. I really hope that you have been enjoying it on some level. I hope that you've been able to find some name for something that is going on inside of you. But listen, I just want to say this. One of the things that I'm learning through the deconstruction fireside chats that we've been having up here on Tuesday nights is that it's near impossible for us to name everything that everyone is experiencing or feeling right now. And so I just want to say that if we haven't even gotten close to naming the thing that you feel really bothered or disrupted about on the inside, I just want to say that I'm really sorry that we haven't been able to kind of name that for you. My hope, though, is that this conversation is helping you get at some of this stuff and maybe do some of your own soul searching and some of your own hard work to get in there and name some of that stuff for yourself. I want to recognize that there's a whole community of people out there that are really just trying to answer the question for themselves: does God exist? And other very complicated questions. And we really haven't even gotten into that kind of stuff, but I just want to say it. That's so real. We know that, we see you, and we're carrying that stuff with you. There's just so much stuff that's so complex that we're all trying to mine out right now. I hope that this morning what you'll find is that there's an invitation for us all to come closer to, I guess, just that, an invitation that's in God's heart for us. This morning, Jeff and I are going to talk about, Dr. Geoffrey Holsclaw and I are going to apply what we as a church have been learning about attachment theory to this whole subject of deconstruction. And honestly, we've never heard anybody do this before. We're just kind of riffing on what we have learned, on what's really important to us, the way that we stand in awe of the way that God has hardwired our brains to relate to one another, and the experiences that we've all had throughout our lives that have basically curated in us an attachment or a relational style. So if you haven't been with us on this journey through the attachment conversation, we as a church have really embraced this idea that the gospel is really a story about Jesus coming to earth to restore a secure attachment with God, that we could have a relationship with God no matter what your upbringing was like, no matter what your traumas in your life have all added up to be. The hope of the gospel is that a relationship with God can dive into your story. God, through a relationship with you, can dive into your story and begin to repair and heal the broken narratives of the past that are shaping the way that you relate to God, self, and others. We've found this to be very, very helpful for us. We believe that it's very gospel-centered. In fact, we believe that this whole idea of attachment theory is helping us just name and define our experience of God the way that it has kind of played out. Now listen, Attachment 101, I guess if you really want to dive in, you could go all the way back to October of 2020, and you could dive into a months-long series that we did on attachment to really dive into the roots of this if you want to get caught up with us. The basic gist of it is this, is that growing up in your household with your primary caregivers, you learned certain ways of relating to people. You related to those who were caring for you, and they related to you a certain way. Now, sometimes that went really well, and sometimes that didn't go so well. Man, I'm learning as a parent right now that no matter what no matter how hard I try, and I am trying hard, you guys, I know that we all are, trying to raise my kids to grow up with a secure attachment, but I know beyond the shadow of a doubt, because I can already see it, that there are things that my kids are going to need to talk about someday with a therapist about what it was like to grow up with me as a dad. Hopefully they'll be able to say, my dad was a good dad. He did the very best that he possibly could, but he didn't have some of the tools that he needed along the way to really help me come back to joy, or to help me come back into just a peaceful, soothed place. I'm a human being. Your parents were human beings, right? And they just weren't able to bat 1,000 in parenting. That's kind of what parenting is, right? So what we're doing in the attachment frame is we're going back through our lives and we're naming some moments or naming some relational patterns that were alive in our original family. We're able to honor our families. Literally, we're able to honor our families, and we're trying to be honest about that at the same time. And it's not just our families, it's coaches you've had, or teachers that you had, or boyfriends and girlfriends that you had, or best friends that you had. All of these relationships have added up, and they've curated within us a way that we relate to each other and to the world. And sometimes those relational patterns are not working out for us. Now, here's the deal. We're not trying to scapegoat our parents, right? We're not trying to blame them. We're not trying to go, oh, it's their fault that I am the way that I am. What we're trying to do is we're trying to assess and diagnose the way things were so that we now can take responsibility for who we are in the world today. Really, the whole attachment paradigm is about us as autonomous individuals being able to take ownership and take responsibility for our relational life right now so that we don't live an emotionally blocked life. I heard on a podcast this week, I think it was N.T. Wright, who was saying the great wonder about this generation, this next generation, is that they are not nearly as emotionally blocked as the generations that have come before. And in fact, if we hope to lead them, then we have to actually help them find language for the emotional awakening interruption that's happening within them. So that's really what we're trying to do here with you guys, and we're trying to say the gospel has something to say to that. So if you're just now getting caught up with us, know this. Things have happened to you in your lifetime, right? I'll give you a story. Let me just give you a story right now. I was telling this story to my boys the other day. When I was a junior in high school, I moved to a new high school, and I decided I was going to try out for the baseball team. Okay, well, the baseball team was likely already set. They were already in it, right? Huge 5A Texas high school, and I was just walking on. And I remember I tried out. I went to practices for an entire semester, right? An entire semester, and I worked my tail off every single day. I remember running so hard in one practice that I actually threw up. And if you know anything about me, you know that's a huge deal for me, right? In my life. Maybe that accounts for part of my phobia. But anyway, we're coming back here to this now. I remember working so hard for that coach. And I remember so much just wanting him to see me, right? Just wanting him to see me, see my effort, put me on the bench for the season. I just wanted to be a part, right? Well, on the day that he cut me from the team, he called me into his office, and he started to call me by a name that wasn't my name. And as it turns out, this coach didn't even know my name. I had worked so hard for him for an entire semester, and he didn't even know my name. So there's all kinds of messages, right, that you pick up in a moment like that when your heart gets injured. I remember walking out of his office that day, and I had this whole swirl of emotions inside. I was angry, I was mad, I was hurt, I was sad. I felt invisible. And all of those things kind of got stuck. They got stuck in my soul. And then, as it turns out, I actually started to believe some narratives about myself that started to play out in my life later on. Okay, that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. That was a stupid thing that happened to me, a tragic thing that happened to me in my life, and you have yours, right? Well, the whole attachment frame helps us go back and just say, there is stuff that happened in my past, and it is impacting the way that I relate now. And where my relationships are not working, or where I'm experiencing a great deal of anxiety and panic or total avoidance, right? Where I just kind of go into problem-solving mode all the time. Yeah, all of these are attachment behaviors God has something to say about all that. So it just might be that in the deconstruction journey that you're on, that there's something about your attachment style, your style of relating, that is at play. And we can just think about that. And we can just ask the question, what then is God inviting me into? If he is good, right? If secure attachment is all about being safe, seen, and soothed, what do those things have to do with the invitation that God is giving me right now in this deconstruction journey that I'm on, right? That I'm in right now. So, you guys, hopefully this will be interesting. I pray that we're going to hear a gentle invitation from the Father today just to come close into his secure embrace as we try to continue to name some things. Huge thanks to Geoff Holsclaw for all that he's done for us in this series. Let's jump into it, you guys. This is our third installment on the deconstruction series on how our attachment patterns matter in the deconstruction process. Here we go.
Jeff, both you and I are pastors who are curious about the intersection between neuroscience and theology, or like attachment theory and discipleship, right, and how that could really impact the way we live as a church. And certainly I think what you and I both hold is a great deal of hope that these ideas could really build a better church into the future. And in many ways, I feel like the Gathering Network is like the R&D department of the church right now, like the research and development arm of the church right now, that we're able to run a bunch of plays that maybe like large mega churches just really aren't able to, right, because we're smaller, maybe a little bit more nimble. And we might be getting into some stuff right now that I don't know, man. Like I just, and I know you believe in that this is like the stuff of the future, that we're really talking about right now. So everybody give us grace as we jump into this. We're just two pastors who are kind of curious about how attachment intersects with this conversation that we've been having on deconstruction. And so, Jeff, here's what we're going to do, man. I'm assuming that some people are just joining us. Some people are like, what in the world is attachment theory? So number one, like, just kind of give us a refresher on attachment theory. And then let's start talking about how attachment theory might speak to our deconstruction processes that we may be in right now. Yeah. So attachment theory 101, go ahead, man.
Because I'm the teacher, I always got to link things. So last week we kind of emphasized like we need to move from an individual brain to an embodied faith. And so for me and for you and for the whole church network, an embodied faith means we take science seriously and then our bodies. And so like neuroscience and then attachment theory. Attachment theory is really kind of the intersection of psychology and early childhood development, as well as neuroscience and just kind of the growth and maturation of the brain, and kind of this how our relationships form us. And so it's kind of like embodied development and relational kind of resources. So attachment theory kind of has this idea that we have this inborn behavioral system, this kind of like, wherever it came from, system as like an animal, basically, that makes us attached to a primary caregiver, like automatically. And the caregiver is automatically attached to us. So there's this attachment system that we have for proximity seeking. So we stay close to them, especially when we're children, but then also for providing care. And so basically an attuned, and I know you use this language regularly, but an available and an attuned caregiver starting in infancy will create in the child what is called a secure attachment, or a secure attachment style, in which the child bonds with the caregiver and develops this kind of internal representation. They call it internal working models, but this representation of the world that basically says things like, and this is like, they're not thinking, this is just it's like a download of like software that we just live off of. And so a securely attached child, because the caregiver was available and attuned, believes that the world will kind of tend toward good things, that a bad thing will turn into a good thing eventually, that other people are available to help, and that I have resources or agency to do things in the world. So when the things I do in the world matter, and that people are available, and that the world is kind of a good place. So that's when the attachment system kind of gets downloaded properly. So, but what happens when a caregiver is either not available or not attuned, misattuned, then the child kind of gets a different software downloaded. And they develop different strategies. So this is often called the insecure attachment style, where the child kind of learns, well, maybe the world isn't that good because, bad things just kind of stay bad. Or maybe people aren't available to help me because I do things and they don't help me, or they don't help me when I want them to. I'm confused by how to get help. And then they also start believing that maybe what they do doesn't matter in the world. Like, I can't get the attention of the caregiver to give me the things I need. And so some people say that, like, the attachment system and the different programs that get downloaded into us, if we can use that language, the technical language is internal working models. But it comes down to this. An attachment style can be represented by different answers to this one question. So the question is that a child is kind of implicitly asking, can I count on my attachment figure to be available when I need them to be? So a securely attached child will answer yes. So when I need help, someone will help me. What you guys call, I think, an ambivalent kind of response is maybe. I might get help depending on how I ask and depending on what the caregiver's up to in the moment. Sometimes I get help, sometimes I don't. Someone that is develops an avoidant attachment style, their answer is no. Someone's not helping me. People don't help me. I am on my own. I am alone in the world, and I have to figure it out myself. And so those are kind of the three kind of strategies that develop most commonly in people when we talk about attachment styles and attachment theory or something like that.
Yeah.
So that was a quick download. Do you want to add stuff to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, we're both learning that one of the things that's been most compelling to us about neuroscience is learning that one of the most powerful places in our brain is the attachment center that is found in our brain. There's an actual attachment center in our brain. It's the part of our brain that processes relationships. And that one place is the most transformative part of our brain. That transformation is able to occur more quickly when you know that you are in a secure environment, when you're in a place that is glad to be with you, with people who are glad to be with you, in a place and in an environment that you know will hold you and be resilient with you, be elastic with you, kind of like let you be, that will not prefer your behavior over your personhood. You know what I mean? A place that will say, you can be you and we will hold you. We can hold you. And I think one of the things and the reason why we're bringing this into the deconstruction conversation is because we have had, many of us, we have had an attachment to certain paradigms. And when those paradigms start to get questioned, it's not just that you're like rethinking information, you're going on an attachment trip. Like, you're going on an attachment journey. So we like to say a lot of the times, like, the whole deal with like attachment is you relate the way that you relate. Well, we talked about evangelicalism last week. So how does a person who grew up in an evangelical church, and that was their frame, that was largely their identity, whether they knew it or not, was to belong to this people, for them to begin to question and walk away from those people, or to walk away from that place, is an attachment journey. It is an attachment trip. And they are going to start to exhibit behaviors that are going to be emblematic of the attachment style that they hold, likely, right? So kind of walk us through this. Like, if a person was like an ambivalent if they had like an ambivalent attachment style, what would deconstruction look like for them? And why would it matter, I guess,
An ambivalent person, their internal working model or their system kind of download, their relational kind of software is kind of has this one main fear of being abandoned. And so they kind of, but they haven't given up on attachment. And so people would say that they have what's called like a hyperactive attachment system, which is, I don't know when I'm going to get my needs met or how. And so I'm hypervigilant would be another way of saying it. I am scanning my relational environment constantly, looking for clues about who might help me or who is paying attention to me, and then also who's not, so that I can try to manage the situation. And I'm really good at figuring out what other people need, so that, because when they have their needs met, then they're more likely to help me get my needs met. And so I'm in this constant, like, you could call it almost codependent kind of relationship, because I'm just trying to manage. So I'm hyper vigilant in all of my kind of interactions. And so what that I think that might mean is, if you kind of, well, one is it would help, you would resist a deconstructive process for as long as possible, depending on the community you're in. So the fear of abandonment would mean you would suppress a faith crisis, or you'd put on a good faith for as long as possible within the community that you feel connected to, because you don't want to disrupt your relationships. But then once you kind of make that shift, that like this faith crisis or these relationships, like I just can't hold it together anymore, then you're more likely, I think, to then kind of really embrace the journey of deconstruction. But I think that a more ambivalent person, because they're on a hyperactive attachment, and relationships and emotions are so important to them, is they're much more likely to find a new community, whether that's online or whether that's just a close group of friends who are asking the same thing. Like, they're going to find a different community right away because they need community. And I think an ambivalent person is much more, because it's a hyperactive attachment, they're probably going to be asking very emotionally charged questions, like, how could a God of love send people to hell? Or, I am outraged that Christians would act like this when they do these types of things. And so, like, their kind of deconstruction is it's going to burn pretty hot, probably. It's not a slow simmer. It's like, it's burning pretty hot would be kind of my guess. And so on their way of finding new answers or new ideas, it's really about finding a new community. I need a new people to be with who maybe have a different understanding of God, but also kind of are caring about the things that I care about with the same kind of passion. And so, and maybe this would be a way of thinking of it, but an ambivalent person, it's more of a fight response. Like I want relationship, and I'm going to work really hard to find the relationships that I'm striving after. And so it's kind of this fight response that might be, I'm going to fight against the deconstructive process because I'm afraid of it. And then it might turn to, now I'm fighting against the community that I left because they did it all wrong and they caused all these problems. So I think it's very much more of kind of that tendency, whereas the avoidant person would have kind of different responses.
Yeah.
So that'd be my kind of initial kind of thought, is a lot of passion, a lot of emotion, and very much concerned about relationships, and that the faith journey is really about those emotions and relationships.
Yeah. And there may be people who are watching this right now who are like, oh my gosh, like that's really defining me. There's certainly people who are like, I have friends who, there you go, man, you're naming them, but yeah. So kind of move us now toward the more avoidant spectrum. So what might deconstruction, that process, what might that experience be like for somebody who's more avoidant in nature?
Sure. Well, going back to that fundamental question is like, will someone help me get my needs met? The ambivalent person would say maybe. And so that's why their attachment system is hyperactivated, because they don't know when it's yes and when it's no. And so they're constantly scanning. An avoidant person, their answer is no. My needs are not met by other people. So instead of fearing abandonment, avoidant people, in a sense, already experience abandonment, either whether it's physical abandonment and neglect, or whether it's just kind of emotional abandonment, right? So, but they're kind of like, they've already turned off. And so people would say they've actually deactivated their attachment system. Is like, that doesn't do me any good. When I make myself open and vulnerable to people, I just get, abused again, or forgotten or neglected. And so I just don't do that. So and then my body and my emotions, which are primarily the way your relationships get processed, that just gets shut down. So avoidant people are usually disconnected from their own bodies and emotions. So then they're all left brain. They tend toward the left brain, which is ideas, cognitive, logical, linguistic kind of constructs. And so I think people like this who are going on a deconstructive journey, it probably, it could have some relational tension that prompted it, but it's probably much more heady. It's,
like cerebral.
Yeah, very cerebral. I have these problems with the Bible, or that theology doesn't work for me the way it used to. I'm just sick of doing all this work for a distant God who won't pay attention to me anyway. So why am I even doing this? And so I think it's much more of the slow kind of simmer, kind of deconstruction, where there's kind of a slow kind of creep through these questions. I think avoidant people probably do the deconstructive journey kind of alone. Is they're probably just kind of in their head. People, they might change or shift a lot before even a spouse or a trusted partner would even know that there's because they might keep going to church. They're not about to bust everyone,
Yeah, I was going to say they might like still be like running all the plays or like running through the motions, while in their head they're just not. They're like, no, I'm not here anymore. Like I don't.
Depending on the avoidant person, is they could just have given up on faith and still just go to church for the rest of their life, because for them, like it's easier to do that than it is to let the relationships know, because then you have to input all this relational energy, and it's just easier not to do that. So I'll just have, my lack of faith or my totally changed faith, and everyone around me will just assume that I'm like on the same kind of ship as them.
Yeah. So really important then for like our avoidant friends, or maybe you, if you're watching and you have like an avoidant tendency to bring people in, like even back to week 1, it's like, don't walk alone. Don't walk alone. Right. Walk with other people. Walk with people who are even going to question you a little bit. What about like a secure? I'm interested in this. Like, what about somebody who is like securely attached? We talk about it here at the Gathering Network as like a secure attachment to God, self, and others.
Right.
And I don't know, man, paint a picture of what like the deconstructive process could be, because that's kind of an ideal situation, Sure. Like what might that look like?
Well, so just to go back to the other avoidant, I said that I always say different words. So the ambivalent is more of the fight kind of one. So the avoidant would be more flight, right? So
right.
Things like that, or fawning, right? So I'll just kind of go through the motions, pretend. So for the secure, I think I was really thinking about that, right? Because I don't want to say something like, well, securely attached people don't deconstruct their faith, because that's not true.
All right.
But I think the manner in which they do it, one is securely attached people usually have a more hopeful orientation to the world. And so there's probably a sense that instead of, oh no, I'm afraid that Christianity doesn't have answers, there's probably more of the sense of like, because they have like a flexible and adaptable kind of relational system already downloaded in their brain, they're more hopeful. And so there'll probably be like a broader kind of searching of Christian resources. And so someone who's anxious, and I've seen this, or ambivalent, I've seen this quite a bit. I have questions. I asked 3 people, they gave me bad answers, and I quit my faith, like, in a span of like 3 months. Right. But a securely attached person it'd probably be like, I have questions. You didn't give me good answers. I'm going to ask different people. I'm going to cast my net broader. I ask more questions. Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm going to spend a little more, or interesting answer. I'm going to spend more time on that. Right. And so like, there's this kind of, a longer kind of commitment maybe to that search, because their orientation is good things will come about eventually. Whereas the insecure attachment has that orientation of like, well, good things aren't going to like, they're not going to like, chances are slim a good thing's going to come out of this. So that would be one. I think Securely attached people, they're more apt to integrate emotional and cognitive arguments. And so while the ambivalent person probably will, be swayed or compelled by emotional arguments, and maybe the avoidant person is going to be all about the details of a cognitive argument, a securely attached person will be able to appreciate a transforming faith that is actually integrating those two. And that's kind of one of the main things I was thinking about for this kind of conversation is, if you're insecurely attached, your deconstructive journey might keep you insecurely attached. Like, because you might just go from like one source to another, but you're still anxious, or you're still, trying to find that need that, or you're just looking for cognitive answers and you just switched answers, right?
Yeah.
But you're not actually integrating your body and your relationships at all. You're just like, well, I gave up on those answers and now I have these answers.
Yeah.
Right? But we haven't moved forward as like a holistic integrated person. But a securely attached person will probably be able to acknowledge or integrate that right and left kind of brain. Then the last thing, and this is kind of off the top of my head, is I think securely attached people are better at integrating their past and their present in an honest way. And so someone who's securely attached will be able to say about themselves, I have done these things and they weren't very good, and I'm actually kind of good at these things. And then they'll also be able to say about their parents, my parents tried their best, but they had these flaws. An insecurely attached person usually will say one of two things. The avoidant person will tend to say, oh, my parents were great. And then that's it, right? And then kind of an ambivalent person will probably be really quick to name all the things that their parents were bad at. And so, but the truth is most of our parents were kind of good at some things and bad at other things, and they were kind of trying their best and they failed, right? And so a securely attached person will be able to be honest about that. And so sometimes when people talk about Christianity or the church or Christian history, is, are we getting kind of an integrated kind of view? And so I think securely attached people they'll probably be a little bit more open to kind of the good and the bad, rather than kind of having a rosy kind of picture, or it's all been doom and gloom and Christians have contributed to the destruction of the world or something like that. And I hear both those kind of things, like Christianity has saved the West, Christianity is the curse, upon the earth. And it's just like, well, it's a more of a mixed bag than that.
Yeah. There's a reason why I feel like this matters, man. And this is a metaphor that we've been using once or twice on this journey. If you were having dinner with my wife, she would certainly be bringing this metaphor, because this has become like a way to like see her reality right now. So she's kind of evangelizing it. But it's this idea. And in the first talk that you did, you talked about the Psalms of orientation, disorientation, and reorientation, well, also, I think it was Richard Rohr who kind of maybe took that idea and turned it into like boxes of order, disorder, and reorder. And really, that's what the deconstructive process is. It's like when in your early life, your early paradigms were an ordered box. We talked about fundamentalism last week, and that's really the name of the game for fundamentalism, is like, try to keep the box ordered. I talked to somebody about that Jenga stack that we talked about at the end of episode 1, this person grew up in like a fundamentalist, environment. And they were like, yeah, you can even ask questions about the Jenga stack. Like, you couldn't pull a little piece out and mess with it. You couldn't ask questions. It was a perfect stack, and it had to stay a perfect stack. And if you ask questions about it, we don't do that, Yeah.
That's a good example.
Yeah, exactly. So you have your ordered box. Richard Rohr would even say that it's the best box to grow up in, because it provides like a sense of safety and warmth and certainty and security. But then something comes along, right? And it dumps the box out. I remember when I lost my sister in a car accident. And I remember that sense of just everything that I believed. It felt like just a garage sale out on the lawn,
Yeah.
It was like just complete, my box was obliterated. And that was a deconstructive moment for us. You know, families that go through cancer, the whole, like when you question your faith, I mean, there's a million things that can disorder the box, right? But then what happens right there when everything is disordered? I'm interested in the attachment conversation because of that right there, because attachment speaks to what happens when we get dysregulated, when the world blows up, when everything falls apart. Because what these deconstructive moments do to it, they serve us to mature us, right? To bring us into a clearer vision of what reality is, right? How do we live for God and experience cancer at the same time? You know, like that's going to happen until Jesus returns, you know? And so like that mixture of like faith and suffering and all that stuff, how do we then emerge into a reordered box where we have a more mature faith? And I think so much of what's happening right now is what God might potentially say to us about our attachment story when everything is undone. Meaning it's an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity for us to experience Jesus in a new way. When everything that was certain before is now uncertain and it's all undone, there are new questions and there are new ways that God wants to come to us, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like a call that I'm messing around with this like metaphor in my mind about what the gathering network in our future might be. It's sort of this sense that we're dropping a ladder into the deconstructed box, right? For a generation that can't get out of it. They can't get out of the deconstruction box. Our world kind of wants us to live just constantly deconstructing, but as you said in episode 1, we can't just do that. You know, we can't just do that. So what does it look like for us to drop a ladder in so that people can find a way to journey into a more mature sort of rebuilt world in the time that it takes? Number one, who are we going to be as a church that's experiencing so much disruption and deconstruction? How can we hold people? But then thirdly, where are the guides among us? You know, the sage elders who broke free of a fundamentalist frame because they battled cancer or they experienced the death of a child or whatever. And then they became people who, there's not a lot of them. You know, that's the thing. There's not a whole lot of them because the first box was so, I don't know, man, like this may be a provocative thought and I don't mean for it to sound this way. Please, everybody understand that I'm not making a political claim here just to make a political claim. I'm not doing that just to be provocative, because we could deconstruct the left just as easily. We really could. But it might be that merger between Christianity and nationalism that we've been experiencing and having so much hard time with the way to really understand the political move toward the right of the evangelical church might be the desperate measure to keep everything in the box. Mm-hmm. Make America great again. Right. Make America righteous again. Make America holy again. Make it, so much so that we would give our allegiance, guys, again, not to just be like, this is an attachment story. This is an attachment story. That the frame that we had before would give its allegiance to a man who did not embody that faith. I think that's so much of what the next generation is trying hard to kind of make sense of, that was the last ditch effort to keep it in the box. But here we are where the box is unraveling, and somewhere in the mix, we have a double whammy going on where I feel like God is bringing something new out of the next generation through the deconstructive cycle for those who will allow themselves to go into a secure attachment with him. But also the enemy is coming in, and I feel like I mean, you said last week, like this whole deconstructive process is really making you angry as a pastor. And it's because you kind of know, it's like, man, it feels like there's a wolf in the sheep pen. You know what I mean? It's like, we can't tell what's what, and we're seeing people getting taken out, all that stuff.
Well, it mostly makes me angry because I think it shows just how the church in the West has failed. Right. So I'm angry at our, forefathers. But then that's like the main place my anger. So this box thing has my head spinning. So I was taking notes while you were talking. I was trying to think about this. So
yeah, let me wrap this. The last thing is that we really need guides who are in a reconstructed place, who can say to those who are in the deconstructed place, not, I know all the answers for you, but we just need guides who can look into the deconstructed disorder and just like look to the next generation and say, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like, trust Jesus, like throw it all on Jesus. Like don't give up on Jesus. It's just like what you said last week at John 6. It's like, where else would we go? You alone have the words of life. Like let him move you into a secure attachment and coach your heart to trust in new ways and hope in new ways, and not to grow cynical, but to experience your skepticism, like all of the things that we've been talking about. To me, it feels like a hopeful and pastoral vision for what could be possible right now, So yeah, go ahead, man. What were you going to say there?
We learn how to do these things by seeing other people do them.
Mm-hmm.
We don't just learn about them by reading a book, right? We see other people respond to their children or to their grandparents, and we see people die well, and we see people just say, I don't have answers for that. I'm still wondering myself. And they're like, oh, you can do that? You can just not know and still pray. You can not know how pray works and still pray every day. Like that's allowed. Right. And so, so that's where we get back to the guides and those types of things.
Yeah, man. I think that the guide conversation is big. The guide dynamic is really, really big. And it's a tricky one, man, because we live in an information age where I don't think I'm talking about like somebody on a podcast, who's like dishing out progressive ideas all the time. I think I'm talking about somebody in your world who is like a sage elder who you look at. You may not agree with them, but you look at their character and you look at their tone. You know what I mean? You're like, you can sense from them that they are made of love. They are a smooth stone. They have been under the water of God's rushing love like their whole life, and they have become like a smooth stone. They may believe differently politically than you. They may believe like a different atonement theory than you, like we were talking about last week. They might believe but you know what? They can hold you, and they love. And that's the point, And I just wonder if, like you were saying, like maybe you don't need to go spend time with C.S. Lewis. Maybe you need to go spend time with Mother Teresa. It's like, well, maybe you don't need to go spend time with the guy on the podcast who's going to provoke all your ideas. Maybe you need to go spend time with somebody who actually got love right, And you need to sit with them and you need to say, can you tell me stories about the time when you went through infertility or a miscarriage, or when you and your husband were near divorced or got divorced or whatever, and then how you like kind of came back into love for God. And we need the sages among us to sit with the next generation and to just put our arms around them and just say, you're going to be okay. Yeah. What's your perspective on guides, man? And then we can kind of, move to the last thing and kind of button it up. But like, what do you think?
Well, we need more of them.
Yeah, we do.
I think, and we don't have enough. And our culture doesn't value them. We want celebrities. We don't want sages, I think is, and part of it goes back to the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution. Is we in the West, we value youth. We value what's new. And if you're not a productive, which means you're not making money for somebody, member of society, if you're retired, then you need to kind of move on and get out of the way. We have this generational kind of like antagonism, over the last 50 to 100 years. But the truth is people, who are older, who have weathered these storms, their mental models are very robust. and they spontaneously do good things, and we need to kind of learn from that. And that's where, like, you know, in ancient cultures and still cultures outside of the West, you know, you have multiple generations living close to each other. And so you have people inputting wisdom, you know, this is wisdom instead of law. And so I talked about last week, you know, we become a rights kind of oriented kind of culture. And that's all about law. And you can know the law as an individual, right? But you can't learn wisdom as an individual. You learn wisdom like by being around wise people.
Yeah, that's
like,
it.
well, why did you respond that way? But in this situation, which was just about the same, you responded differently. But I don't like why, you know, and then you have to process that with people. So those take deep and kind of abiding relationships. And so we don't have those, you know, and like from a real macro kind of level, this one guy, he wrote kind of a history of civilizations based off of right, left brain kind of
Oh my gosh.
development. And he basically says, well, since the Enlightenment, we've been all left brain.
Mm-hmm.
And then especially with the technological kind of rollouts, like we just becoming more and more kind of like logical, linear, separated, you know, he basically says we're all schizophrenic. And I think that's really contributing to the lack of sages is, you know, now people are kind of seeing that. And I think fundamentalism is captured in kind of that hyper left brain kind of mode. And people are seeing, well, that's not good. So now they're kind of rushing to the other side of the brain rather than integrating them. And, you know, and now, so we just you know, the sages who kind of live integrated lives aren't valued either, because sometimes they say, hey, well, calm down. Like, you know, like, and then nobody wants to hear them say, calm down. Right. Because that feels patronizing. So anyways, so our whole culture doesn't want sages. And local churches don't either. Like I know, you know, like people say, well, you know, it's time to let the new leadership in and things like that. And we need to step back so they can move forward. And this is the way of the world. It's like, well, that's actually not the way of the world. And now we're just kind of lost without sages. And that's.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you for your wisdom, your gifts, man, for spending them here on us for 3 weeks, man. It's meant the world to us. Sure. It's been helpful. And hopefully this is not the last time. So
I loved it.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody go find Geoff Holsclaw. Google him and find him online and get his stuff. Jeff, thanks so much, man. Hopefully we will see you around the bend soon, man. Thanks so much. Sure.
Okay, you guys, well, that was it. What do you think? I mean, look into your life. Look into your relational patterns. Look into all of the emotions that you're feeling right now and all that you're thinking and all that you're experiencing, and apply some of this thought. Like, what do your attachment patterns, what does your attachment style, your relational style tell you about your experience in this moment of deconstruction if you're in it? Hopefully you will find some answers there, and especially what I hope you will hear and find is that God is inviting you. This could be a whole moment where God is inviting you into a secure attachment to say to you, hey, in the moments where you're freaking out, if you've had a moment in this whole thing where you've literally been freaking out, right? Because you don't feel seen, you don't feel safe, you don't feel soothed, anything like that, then know this: your Heavenly Father, who is good, if you can believe it, is asking you to come close so He can say to you, I see you, I hear you, I know what's going on in the depths of your heart, and I want to soothe you. I want to soothe you with the presence of my Holy Spirit and my love, right? Now look, that might not sound like His voice being audible to you. It might just be that you're on a walk in nature, doing the things that you know you have done in the past to connect with God. You get into those things, and hopefully, prayerfully, you will begin to experience that thing that feels like God seeing you. That's our prayer for you today, you guys. Listen, if you need anything, reach out to us. We're here to help. Know that we're praying for you. And we have one more fireside chat that you're welcome to come to. If you'd like to come to that, Tuesday night, 7 p.m., RSVP right now at gatheringnetwork.org. We'll send you an email, and we hope to see you there. Otherwise, God bless you guys. Know that we're praying for you.